This week on Let's Craft Together, I'm going to show you how to make this lovely gathered apron. I have been baking a lot and cooking a lot in this crazy time, so I thought it'd be nice to have a homemade apron. This is a great gift too if you're looking for a gift for someone. You can also not make the top portion of this and just make one that goes down halfway. It also has this adjustable top to it, so you can make it exactly how long you want to at the neck here. You can also just make this larger or smaller. The same concepts would apply to making it. You would just reduce or increase the number of inches that you have. So to make this project, you're going to need a sewing machine set up with some thread. You could also do this hand sewn, but it's just going to take a little longer. You'll need pins and scissors, some sort of marking tool like a pencil or a fabric marker. And you'll also need some sort of measuring tool like this one. The fabric that you'll need for this, there's quite a few pieces. So for this skirt, you're going to need a piece of fabric that is 18 inches by 30 inches. For this bodice area, if you choose to do that, you will need one that's 14 by 14 inches. And then for these pockets, these are 8 by 6 inches, and there's 2 pieces that are that size. And then for the tie straps on the outside, you're going to need fabric that's 18 inches by 2.5 inches. You'll need 2 of those, one for each side. And then for this top neck strap, you'll need 2 pieces that are 1.5 inches by 18 inches. And then lastly, you're going to need a piece of fabric, 2 pieces of fabric that are 19 inches by 2 inches. So 2 of those for this waistband. If you're not going to do this top portion, you can just make this as one piece and not have it as 2 separate pieces. So you can make a piece of fabric that's, 19 inches by 3 or 4 inches, something like that. All right, let's get started.
All right, we're starting by prepping some of our fabric. I have this is one of the pocket pieces, and I have the ugly side of the fabric facing up. It's kind of hard to tell with this fabric, but there is a good side and a wrong side. So I have the wrong side facing up. So we're going to start by folding over the top, one of the short ends of the fabric, by about 1/4 inch. You can use a measurer like this if you'd like to, or you can just eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Or you can just use a regular ruler. That will work too. Just ironing that down. And then you're going to fold again. Make sure that's good. You're going to fold this down again 1/2 inch. Check that. Okay. And go ahead and iron. Now you can pin here, or you can just leave it as be. And we're going to sew along pretty close to this edge here, and that's just holding down again that top edge so we make sure it's not fraying. You're going to do the exact same thing with the other pocket. All right, we're going to do a similar technique with the skirt of the apron and also with the bodice part of the apron. So you can see I've already turned this under. That's just, again, so that we don't have fraying at our edges. You'll also notice that I did the top and each side, but I did not do this bottom edge, one of the short edges, because that's going to be caught up in when we join it all together. So we're going to do the same thing with this skirt part, but we're going to leave the top, one of the long edges, open because that will be the part that we gather. All right, so we're going to start by folding the edge over by 1/2 inch, and again, eyeball this or measure it, whatever you feel comfortable with. Some days I feel more confident than others, so I do or I don't do it. Okay. So you're ironing by 1/2 inch, and then we're going to tuck in halfway so that we don't have that raw edge hanging out there. I think that's good. I'm going to show you how to do one of these corners too, because that can be a little bit confusing to get all those layers set up there. Okay, so again, 1/2 inch. I'm going to do the same thing on this edge and then just show you this corner. These little tools are really nice because you can line up exactly where you want your measurement to be, and the fabric lines up exactly with that, so they're very nice. They're pretty cheap too. Okay, so then again, all the way around, we are folding in 1/4 inch and folding over. You can iron that, or you can just go ahead and pin it. Either way will work. So at these corners, you're doing the exact same thing, except you have 2 of that to do. So you'll do one side and then the other, and just fold it all together there. And again, we're doing this all the way around except for one of the long edges. You'll want to, I would say, probably iron and pin that corner, the 2 corners that you have. And this can be a little bit irritating to do, so just mess with it, be patient, and you'll get it. All right, so go ahead and do that again with both of the large pieces of fabric. So I wanted to show you one more thing about these corners. So you can see here that there's a little piece of fabric that's coming over the edge there. You can just go in there and snip that little corner off. You don't want to get too close to that corner, but there tends to be a lot of bulk right there, and so it can really help for you to be able to get a nice crisp corner if you go ahead and snip that. So you can see that looks a lot nicer. And just continue. All right, so now we're working with our 2 neck straps. We're going to start by turning over the end, and you're going to want to do this on both of the ends of both pieces by 1/4 inch. And again, measure it, don't measure it, whatever you're feeling. And really that can be between 1/4 and 1/2 inch on that end. And then we're going to fold over, again, 1/4 inch on either side. It's pretty close. Iron that down. And then do the other side. You're going to do the exact same thing on both ends. Fold that end under because we want to protect both of our ends from fraying. I'm just going to fold the whole thing over just like that and iron it down. You can go ahead and also pin this together. It helps when you're sewing, I find, if you do pin at this stage. All right, and then do that exact same thing with the other one. You're going to end up with a nice strap that looks something like this. All right, now we're working with the tie fabric, which is the one that's 2.5 by 18 inches long. And you can see here, I had some leftover fabric, a couple of long strips, and so I just sewed them right together. That length there, that width, adds up to about 2.5 inches, so you can sort of piece together your fabric with scraps too, if you would like. And if you have those scraps. So what we're going to do with this piece is a lot like what we've done with most of the other pieces for finishing. We're going to fold over about 1/4 inch, and again, measure that or don't measure it, whatever you're feeling. All right, so we're going to do that on both sides here. And then you'll just fold the whole thing together, side to side. And then we're going to sew along that edge there. You can give it a quick iron and go ahead and pin that, and then we'll sew to hold it all together. The other thing you're going to want to do at one of the ends of your straps is just to turn under that edge again, about 1/4 inch. And the reason you only do the one edge is because the other edge is going to be sewn into the body of the apron itself. So you can just do that one edge. And when you're sewing around there, you'll sew down this edge and then across just to secure that all into place. All right, so now that we've gotten all of our different pieces prepped and ironed and pinned and ready to go, we're just going to run them all through the sewing machine. And most of them, actually all of them, you're going to sew right at the edge where it comes together. So like this is one of the straps that you'll tie around the waist, and you're just going to sew right at that edge. And same thing with your pocket. So you're going to sew right at this lower edge right next to that. And again, same thing with your bodice and the skirt part of the apron. And I like to do this in sort of assembly style. So I like to prep all my pieces first and then run them all through the machine at once, because I find that it just goes a little quicker for me if I can do all of the same task and then move to the next task and do all of that task. So we're just going right down here. And the nice thing about doing it this way too is that you don't even need to snip your thread when you get to the end of these rows, because you already have the next piece ready to go in. So we'll just grab the next one. I haven't pulled that last piece out of the machine at all, and I'm just continuing on with the next one. Most of these pieces are going to have their ends caught up in the seam allowance, so you really don't need to go back on most of these back and forth at the end of them. All right, and we'll just continue to sew around all the edges of everything that we have pinned. All right, so at this stage you should have your prepped waist straps, your prepped neck straps, your 2 pockets that are sewn across the top, your prepped bodice piece, and also your prepped skirt piece. So we're going to start putting all these pieces together now. We're going to start with our bodice and attaching the neck straps to it. All right. So what I like to do is measure about 1.5 inches away from the edge here and make a little marking with a pencil or some other marking tool. So once you've got your mark made right there at the 1.5 inches, really you could put your straps wherever you would like, close up to the edge or further in, just whatever you want. And we're going to take our strap. This is to the ugly side of the fabric, by the way. We're going to put that strap right on there. And I like to do a little bit in from that edge where we protected that end, because then you're not, when you're attaching this, you're not sewing over that really thick part of the folded over fabric. And I will attach it to the inside side of where that marking is. Again, put them wherever you want them. You're going to do the exact same thing on the other side, measuring from this edge to the inside, however much you'd like. Next, we're going to work on attaching our pockets. So I have one of my pockets here. I'm turning it to the uglier side of the fabric, the wrong side. And what we're going to do is, like we've done on a lot of our other fabric to prep it, is just fold it over 1/2 inch, or about that, and iron that down. And then you'll turn in at the 1/4 inch like we've been doing underneath that. So just tuck in the 1/4 inch. So you have a nice finished edge here. We're going to iron that down. What you're going to end up with is your sewn edge here and then folded over edges on the rest of them. You don't need to pin at this stage because we're going to pin it directly to the skirt to attach it. And so there's no reason to pin it. You just need to make sure it's nicely creased with your iron. So let's go ahead and attach. So we have the skirt of the apron. We're going to turn this to the right side up this time. So we can attach these. We're going to measure, again, you can put, these are just like the straps. You can put them really wherever you would like. What I have been doing on mine is measuring 5 inches from the side and 5 inches from the raw edge to get where I would want it to be. So again, I'm measuring and just marking with a pencil. Pencil washes out, so that's why I use it. You can use something fancier, an official fabric marking tool if you'd like. That's up to you. So I'm marking there. Make sure you get a nice mark for yourself. And then we'll mark the other direction. Okay. And if you have a ruler like this one that has lines on it, you can get a better straight line there. That can be helpful for lining things up just right. So you have this corner then that you can work from. And we're going to attach our pocket just like that, right at that corner. And as you're attaching this, it's a little bit hard to get quite right, but just do your best. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. But hopefully, because you have that edge already ironed down, it won't be too bad. So then we're just going to pin that in place all the way around, and then you're going to top stitch from this side down, across, and up. Of course, you don't want to do the top because then you'd close off your pocket. So now I'm sewing my straps on, and I'm going to sew that pocket on as well. What we're going to do with the strap is just go over that edge a bunch of times so it's nice and secure. Just back and forth a couple times. You can pull that out. Do the same thing with the other side. And then we're going to do the pocket. As you can see here, I have put a ton of pins in. That's because these corners tend to want to come up a little bit. This is probably the hardest part to sew of this whole project. So like I always say, just be patient with yourself. Take your time. I'm going to show you how to do one of these corners because it can be a little tricky. So we're sewing about at 1/4 of an inch, a little bit inside that so that we're catching all of those layers. And I am going to go back and forth on these first few stitches just to give the end of the entrance to my pocket a little bit more stability. And then once we get to these corners, you may have to adjust your fabric just a little bit to get it to lie just like you want it. As we're approaching, we're slowing down a little bit. And then I like to use my hand wheel here because I think it helps a lot to get a better exact corner here. And this, because it's top sewing, you're going to see it a lot more clearly. So put your needle down, do your pivot, and keep on going. And you'll do that same technique around all of the corners for both of the pockets. All right, so now that we've got our pockets attached, we're going to do the gathering of the top of the skirt. This can be a little intimidating for people, but it's really not hard at all. What we're going to do is sew twice across the top, this raw edge here, once at 1/4 inch and once at 3/8 of an inch. And we're going to do it with a basting stitch, which is a larger, longer stitch. As you can see, this is the length on my machine. Your machine may look different. We're just going to increase that so that we have a longer stitch. And what that's going to do is create space for us to tug on those strings and then gather it together. And I'll show you exactly how to do that. All right, so you can see I have my 2 lines of basting stitch along that top. And what we're going to do is carefully pull it so we can create this gathering. And we're going to shorten it down to be about 18 inches. So the trick to this is to leave a little bit of a tail on one end as you're sewing, and also to not go back and forth at the ends, because that's going to lock your stitches into place and you don't want that. I'm also grabbing, so there's 2 front stitches and there's 2 back stitches. Grab just either the front or the back and begin to pull, and that's going to create your gather. And as you go along, you can just move that gather down and just continue in that same way. You can start from either end and work on that till you have an even gather across the whole way, and just go ahead and measure it and see where you're at as you go through the process and see if you need to tuck it in more or less. All right, so I've got my gather all done here. And it's come out to about 18 inches. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. You just don't want it to be longer than the waistband piece, which is 19 by 2 inches. So you have 2 of these. The other thing you're going to want to watch out for is you may have more bunching in certain areas and less in others. So you just want to go through along your line here and make sure it's pretty much even. Some places may be a little bit more bunched up than others. So before we attach this waistband piece to the gathered skirt, we're going to fold over one of the sides, and that's going to create the line for us to attach the bodice to. So it doesn't matter which side, you want to fold it into the uglier side of the fabric. So I think I have that, I have that on the wrong side. So we're going to do about 1/2 inch. And again, measure or don't. You can do a little under 1/2 inch, I think, between 1/4 and 1/2. And go ahead and iron that down. You're going to do this to both of your waistband pieces. Again, these are the ones that are 2 inches by 19 inches. Okay, so now that we have that done, we're going to grab our skirt here, and we're going to face that folded end towards the bottom of the skirt, and we're going to line up the top of the skirt with the raw edge. And what you'll end up doing, you'll sandwich together the 2 pieces. I haven't folded that over yet, but I'm going to just show you. You should have that folded over. We're going to sandwich these 2 pieces between the ruffled edge here. You want about 1/2 inch and about 1/2 inch to 1 inch on either side of overhang, depending on how much you've gathered it. So you can just sort of straighten it out and see, that looks pretty good. I have about the same on each side. So you're going to go ahead and pin that. Again, this line here is flush with the edge there. And what I like to do is put pins in one side first instead of pinning it all together at once, because I find it easier. So we're lining up, putting it together. You're going to do that along this whole edge. And then you can go in and attach the back side to it. Again, lining it up. And then just pulling that pin out and going through that 3rd layer. And you'll just continue that way across the whole waistband. So once you've sandwiched all those together, this is what it should look like. Pinned on each side with that little part that we have folded over on the other side. So you can see my little part folded over right there. We're going to sew across the top here. All right, so we are now going to sew along this line that we just pinned and sandwiched all together. We're going to use a 4/8 of an inch of a seam allowance. Make sure that you switch your machine back here to a regular length stitch, because the last step you probably did was to do the basting stitch. So make sure you adjust that before you continue. So we're lining everything up. This is a good spot to go back on. As you're doing this, I have noticed that I like to just take it slow with this one. There's so many layers there. There's so much going on. I do find too that sometimes that gathered edge likes to pull down into the center, even if you have it nicely pinned. So just be aware and go kind of slow. Take your time and just continue down that whole line that same way. So we've got our sewn waistband, and what we're going to do is just pull the top of that up and the back of it up. So what's going to happen is you're going to have a little sort of envelope here that we can tuck the top part of the apron into. We're going to give it a quick iron along that edge so that it's a little bit flatter for us as we do that. And then we're going to take the top part of the apron and tuck the base of it, this raw edge that we left raw, into the bottom part. You're going to want to make sure you have an even amount on either side. You can measure it or you can eyeball it. I'm going to measure mine. This may be different depending on how much you gathered your skirt here. So it looks about even. So I'm going to say that's good. Go ahead and pin that in place. We will sew along this top edge here. We're also at this point going to add on our tie straps. So you're going to take the end that's still raw, not the nicely finished end, and stick that. It will go eventually and be sewn into this seam here. If you have a little bit too much fabric, I feel like that's too much right there for me. So I'm going to snip that off so I don't have to tuck in as much. But you're just going to take those ends, and I also have a bunch, all these threads from doing the bunching up. You can snip those as well. So all we're going to do is just fold that end in so it's flush with the edge of the skirt there. And then we'll go ahead and put the tie in there as well. And it should all fit in there. Let's see. You can also, you see came out a little bit wider than the edge there. So what I'm going to do is just take a little tuck in that so that it all fits nicely. And then we'll give it a pin. And then we're going to sew, as we're sewing this top line here, we'll also sew along that edge. And then we should be all done. So I'm going to start at one of these ends, go up this direction, across, and all the way across until I get to my other strap here. And as you're doing this, make sure that you're getting just one layer of your apron and not getting things stuck where they're not meant to be. This is another spot where I would recommend going over your ends, because that strap is going to get a lot of use. So you want to make sure it's nice and tight for you. As you're taking it around this corner, you may need to tuck in some of those ends a little bit so they're not hanging out, and readjust things for yourself. Again, just take your time. And we'll continue down this whole line and then over to this other side.
And there we have our finished apron.